Ever feel like you're missing like half the conversation?
Yeah.
You know, like there's this whole silent language thing happening right in front of you, and you just can't figure it out. Well, guess what? It turns out there's a whole science to this, reading people's uh, unspoken cues, and it's way more fascinating than you might think. We're talking nonverbal communication, those subtle, often unconscious signals that reveal what someone's really thinking and feeling, even if their words are saying something totally different. So strap in, because this deep dive is going to take us deep into the world of body language, facial expressions, and all those tiny tells that betray our true emotions. And to guide us on this journey, we're turning to the work of Joe Navarro, a former FBI counterintelligence agent who spent decades studying nonverbal behavior. His book, What Everybody Is Saying, is like a secret decoder ring for human behavior. Trust me. Once you start applying his insights, you'll never look at people the same way again. Okay, let's unpack this a bit. Have you ever noticed how in a really tense moment, everyone seems to hold their breath, like when you're watching a scary movie, or you hear a sudden loud noise? That's our limbic system kicking in, that ancient primal part of our brain that's wired for survival. It's the source of our gut feelings, our instinctive reactions to danger. And it's why nonverbal communication is so powerful. It's a direct line to our most authentic selves, bypassing all the filters and social niceties we usually put up. I remember this one time I was at a friend's house for a dinner party.
Right.
Everything was going great. Good food, good conversation, the usual. But then, out of nowhere, the lights went out, pitch black. And in that instant, the entire room went silent. Not just quiet, but like this eerie frozen silence. You could practically feel the tension in the air. Everyone was holding their breath, their bodies instinctively going into that freeze response, waiting to see what happened next. Turns out it was just a blown fuse, nothing to worry about. But for a few seconds there, it was like stepping into a different reality, where all the social masks were stripped away. And you could see people's true primal instincts taking over. See, the thing about the limbic system is that it doesn't lie. It reacts instinctively to protect us, whether it's from a physical threat or an emotional one. And that's where things get really interesting, because those limbic reactions often manifest in subtle, unconscious ways, through what we call pacifying behaviors. Think about it. When you're feeling stressed or anxious, what do? Maybe you rub your neck, or touch your face, or fidget with your jewelry, right? These are all ways of self-soothing, of trying to calm our nerves and regain a sense of control. And while we might not be consciously aware of these behaviors, they're sending loud and clear signals to anyone who knows how to read them. I remember this one time I was in a meeting with a client, and things were getting a bit heated. We were going back and forth trying to negotiate a deal, and the tension in the room was palpable. At one point, I noticed the client kept touching his neck, right above his chest, almost like he was trying to protect himself. And that's when it hit me. He wasn't confident in his position. He was feeling threatened, maybe even a little bit scared. So instead of pushing harder, I shifted my approach, softened my tone, and focused on building rapport. And guess what? The deal got done. The point is, these seemingly insignificant gestures, a touch of the neck, a fleeting facial expression, a shift in posture, can reveal a wealth of information about someone's emotional state. And the more you learn to pay attention to these cues, the better you'll become at understanding the unspoken dynamics at play in any interaction. Speaking of revealing body parts, let's talk about feet, shall we? You might think they're just there to get us from point A to point B. But trust me, our feet are way more expressive than we give them credit for. Think about it. They're our primary means of locomotion, of escape, of getting us out of trouble. So it makes sense that they'd be hardwired to react honestly to our surroundings. Now, remember that poker game analogy I mentioned earlier? Well, it turns out that even the most seasoned poker players have a hard time controlling their feet. They can keep their faces neutral, their hands steady, but their feet, they often betray their true emotions. Happy feet, they call it. Those little bounces, jiggles, and taps that indicate excitement, anticipation, maybe even a touch of nervousness. And if you know what to look for, you can use those happy feet to get a read on your opponent's hand. It's like having a secret weapon, right? But it's not just about poker. Our feet reveal our emotions in all sorts of everyday situations. Like, I remember this one time I was at the airport waiting for a flight.
Right.
And I saw this guy sitting across from me looking all stressed out, tapping his foot like crazy. Figured he was probably just anxious about his flight, the usual travel jitters. But then his phone rang, and boom, his whole demeanor changed. He kicked up the phone, his face lit up, and his foot stopped tapping. It was like a switch had been flipped. Clearly, whoever was on the other end of that call was someone he was really happy to hear from. And that's the thing about nonverbal communication. It's everywhere, if you know how to look for it. From the way someone crosses their legs to the subtle flicker of their eyelids, Our bodies are constantly sending out signals, revealing our thoughts and feelings, whether we realize it or not. And the more you learn to tune into these signals, the better you'll become at navigating the complex world of human interaction. So what will you start paying attention to? The possibilities are endless, and the insights are waiting to be discovered. All right, so we talked about feet, those sneaky little truth tellers. But let's move on up the body, shall we, to the torso. That central hub of our nonverbal communication. You see, our torsos, they're like billboards for our confidence levels. Think about it. When you're feeling good, you stand up straighter, right? Shoulders back, chest out, like you're ready to take on the world. It's called ventral fronting, basically exposing your most vulnerable parts, your heart and stomach, as a sign that you're feeling comfortable and secure. And then there's leaning. We instinctively lean towards things we like, things that draw us in, and away from things that make us uncomfortable. I remember this one time, I was at a conference listening to a speaker.
Right.
And this guy was just captivating. He was funny, insightful, he knew his stuff. And I found myself leaning forward in my chair, hanging on to his every word. But then the next speaker came on. And let's just say he wasn't quite as engaging. And without even realizing it, I started leaning back, crossing my arms, creating distance between myself and the stage. It was like my body was saying, nope, not interested. And speaking of creating distance, let's talk about a classic dominance display. Chest puffing. You know that thing guys do when they're trying to intimidate each other? It's like they're trying to inflate themselves to appear bigger and stronger. And it's not just limited to guys. I've seen women do it too, especially in competitive environments. I remember this one time I was observing a mock trial. And this one attorney, she was just killing it. She was confident, articulate, had all the facts at her fingertips. And every time she made a point, she would subtly puff up her chest, just a little bit, like she was claiming her territory. It was subtle, but it was definitely noticeable. Of course, the opposite of chest puffing is slouching, shoulders slumped, head down, like you're trying to shrink yourself and disappear. And that usually signals low confidence, maybe even sadness or shame. I remember this one time I was walking down the street, and I saw this guy sitting on a bench, just hunched over, looking completely defeated. I don't know what was going on in his life, but I felt this pang of empathy for him, Like I wanted to go over there and give him a hug and tell him everything's going to be okay. But anyway, the point is, our torsos are constantly sending out signals, reflecting our inner state, our confidence levels, our emotional well-being. And once you start paying attention, you can learn to read these signals like a book, understanding the unspoken messages behind people's posture and movements. Now, let's move on to our arms, shall we? Those versatile appendages that can express everything from affection to aggression. Think about it. When you're excited to see someone, your arms open wide, ready for a hug, right? But if you're feeling threatened, your arms might cross defensively, creating a barrier between you and the perceived danger. I remember this one time I was walking home late at night, and I saw this group of guys hanging out on the corner, looking a bit shady, And as I walked past them, I noticed my arms instinctively crossing in front of me, like I was trying to shield myself. It was a purely subconscious reaction, but it spoke volumes about how I was feeling in that moment. Vulnerable, a little bit scared. And speaking of feeling vulnerable, let's talk about restricted arm movements. When someone keeps their arms close to their body, maybe even tucked in their pockets, that's often a sign of discomfort, maybe even an attempt to hide something. I remember this one time I was interviewing a candidate for a job, and this guy, he just couldn't keep his hands still. He was fidgeting, tapping his fingers, constantly adjusting his sleeves. It was like he was trying to distract me from something. And sure enough, it turned out he had some inconsistencies on his resume, things he was trying to downplay. And then there's the classic power move, the hooding effect. When someone leans back, interlaces their hands behind their head, elbows out, it's a way of taking up space, of asserting dominance, of saying, I'm in charge here. I've seen it in boardrooms, classrooms, even on the playground. I remember this one time I was watching my nephew play with his friends, and this one kid, he was clearly the leader of the pack. And every time he made a decision, he would do this hooding thing, like he was the king of the castle. But of course, our arms can also express affection, warmth, connection. Think about a couple holding hands, their arms intertwined, their bodies moving in sync. It's a beautiful display of intimacy, of shared energy, of unspoken understanding. And it's something we instinctively recognize and respond to, even from a distance. I remember this one time I was walking through a park, and I saw this elderly couple sitting on a bench, holding hands, their faces wrinkled with age, but their eyes filled with love. And it just warmed my heart, It was a reminder that even in the twilight years, that sense of connection, of touch, of physical affection, it's still so important. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground, from feet to torsos to arms, and now we're going to delve into the most expressive part of the body, the face. But before we do that, let's take a quick break. Okay, so we talked about feet, torsos, arms, but now let's get to the star of the show, the face. I mean, it's the most expressive part of our body, right? It's like the canvas for our emotions. But here's the thing, the face can also be the most deceptive. We learn to smile politely, even when we're dying inside, to feign interest when we're bored out of our minds. It's all part of being human. But luckily for us, amateur lie detectors, even the best poker face, can't hide everything. See, there are these things called microexpressions, fleeting, involuntary flashes of emotion that betray our true feelings. They happen in a fraction of a second. But they're like little windows into the soul. I remember this one time I was watching a friend's reaction to a surprise birthday party. She was all smiles and hugs. But for a split second, right before the surprise, I saw a flicker of annoyance cross her face. Turns out, she hates being the center of attention. Who knew, right? But microexpressions aren't just for party gossip. They can be incredibly insightful in all sorts of situations. Like, imagine you're interviewing someone for a job, and they say all the right things, but you notice a subtle tightening of the lips, or furrowing of the brows when they talk about their previous employer. Red flag, right. Maybe they're holding back some, let's say less than positive feelings. And then there's eye blocking. Ever notice how people instinctively touch or cover their eyes when they hear something upsetting, or when they're trying to process difficult news? It's like they're literally trying to block out the bad stuff. I saw this happen once at a family gathering. An aunt was sharing some sensitive family history, and I noticed my cousin repeatedly rubbing his eyes, even though he was nodding along, pretending to be interested. Later, he admitted to me that he found the whole conversation incredibly uncomfortable. His eyes were saying what his words couldn't. But eyes aren't just about blocking negativity. They can also reveal positive emotions, like those moments when someone's eyes light up with genuine interest, or excitement, those flashbulb eyes, wide and attentive, like they're soaking up everything you're saying. That's pure, unadulterated engagement, and it's contagious. And speaking of engagement, let's talk about synchrony and asynchrony. Have you ever noticed how when two people are really comfortable with each other, their nonverbal behaviors start to mirror each other? They lean in at the same time, they nod their heads in unison, their breathing even seems to sync up. It's like they're dancing to the same unspoken rhythm. I remember observing this at a coffee shop once. Two friends were deep in conversation. Their bodies angled towards each other, their hands moving in similar gestures, their laughter erupting at the same moments. It's like watching a perfectly choreographed duet. You could just tell they were on the same wavelength, completely in sync. But then there's asynchrony, when people's nonverbal cues clash. One person's leaning in, the other's leaning back. One's all smiles, the other's got their arms crossed. It's like they're speaking different languages, and the message is clear. We're not on the same page here. I saw this happen during a tense work meeting once. Two colleagues were presenting conflicting ideas, and their body language was a battlefield. One was pacing back and forth, gesturing wildly, while the other sat rigidly in his chair, arms folded, barely making eye contact. The tension was palpable, and needless to say, the meeting didn't exactly end on a harmonious note. So what does this all mean for you? Well, for starters, it means you've got a whole new set of tools for understanding the people around you. By paying attention to those subtle nonverbal cues, from fleeting microexpressions to overall body language, you can gain a deeper understanding of their thoughts, feelings, and intentions. And here's the best part. It's not just about being a better observer, it's about being a better communicator. By becoming more aware of your own nonverbal signals, you can learn to project confidence, build rapport, and create more authentic connections with others. So go out there, be observant, and most importantly, have fun with it. The world of nonverbal communication is full of fascinating insights. You just have to know where to look. And trust me, once you start paying attention, you'll never see the world the same way again. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and until next time, keep those eyes peeled.